Evelyn Hart had imagined many versions of the night she would deliver her twins, but none of them looked like the cold, humming hallway outside the labor wing at Mount Sinai Hospital. She should have been focusing on her breathing, the steady rhythm her doctor taught her, yet her heartbeat was louder than the monitors around her. She sat upright on the narrow hospital bed, her hands resting protectively over her belly, trying to believe she was safe. But safety was a fragile story she had repeated to herself for months, and tonight it felt thinner than ever. The fluorescent lights flickered softly as footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. She knew that pattern, slow, heavy, too familiar. Damien Cross always walked like he owned whatever room he entered, even when that room was a place he never deserved to step into. Evelyn inhaled sharply, hoping it was her imagination, but the tension in her shoulders told her the truth before her eyes confirmed it. He appeared in the doorway without a word, wearing the same expensive coat she once thought made him look successful. Now it seemed like armor hiding intentions she no longer trusted. In his hand wasn't anything dangerous, but the leather belt looped loosely around his fingers made her stomach twist. It wasn't the object itself, it was the message, the silent pressure, the way he used small symbols to frighten her when he wanted control. She felt the walls close in, even as nurses moved up and down the hall behind him. "Evelyn," he said calmly, almost gently, as if the softness in his voice could erase everything that came before. "We need to talk before things get complicated." Her breath hitched. Complicated, in Damien's language, meant pressured. It meant corners. It meant choices he wanted her to make on his terms. She gripped the edge of the mattress, grounding herself, reminding her body and her babies that she would not let fear decide anything tonight. "You shouldn't be here," Evelyn whispered. "I'm minutes from going into surgery." "That's exactly why I'm here," he replied, stepping closer. "You and I have unfinished business. And you're going to listen." A nurse glanced in, sensing tension, but Damien shifted just enough to block her view. Evelyn felt her pulse spike. The babies moved restlessly beneath her ribs, as if reacting to the storm he carried with him. Then, from the hallway, a second set of footsteps emerged steadier, more controlled. Evelyn turned her head just slightly and felt her breath catch again. Her mind raced through every possibility, wondering whether the newcomer was a nurse, a doctor, or someone connected to the storm already unfolding around her. She could feel the air shift, carrying a tension that wrapped around her chest and warned her that the situation was about to change forever for her. He wasn't alone at the door. Evelyn Hart had never imagined her life would narrow into a single corridor in Manhattan, but tonight the hallway outside the labor wing felt like a tunnel guiding her back through every choice she had made. The soft beeping of machines blended with her pulse, steady yet strained, and as Damien stood near the door, Evelyn felt the weight of the past trying to settle on her shoulders again. But she had grown since the days she lived in quiet fear, and she was determined not to let him pull her backward. To understand why she trembled now, anyone would have to know where she came from. Evelyn was born in a small New Jersey town, raised by her father until he disappeared from her life when she was 15. Her mother had passed years earlier, making her childhood feel like a series of empty chairs at the dinner table. She learned to survive by working part-time jobs, studying late into the night, and teaching herself never to expect help from anyone. Those years shaped her into someone resilient, though she never admitted how lonely resilience felt. She moved to New York at 21, with nothing but a suitcase and a second-hand iPhone that barely held a charge. She took nursing classes during the day and worked at a small cafe in Midtown at night. Customers came and went, but she remembered the regulars, the ones who smiled kindly, the ones who tipped badly, and the one man who left an impression she wished she could erase. That man was Damien Cross. Damien entered her life with polished shoes, a smooth voice, and the confidence of someone accustomed to expensive offices and private lounges overlooking Park Avenue. To Evelyn, he seemed stable, successful, the opposite of the chaos she had grown up with. She mistook that surface calm for security. She didn't know, then, that some storms are silent before they strike. Their relationship started gently enough. Dinner in cozy restaurants, walks through Central Park, conversations that made Evelyn think she might finally build a life that wasn't defined by struggle. But soon, subtle shifts appeared. Damien criticized her long hours, then her friends, then the way she laughed or made decisions. He had a talent for making concern sound like love and control, sound like protection. She didn't realize what was happening until she had already given him more of her trust than he deserved. When she discovered she was carrying twins, she moved carefully, hoping Damien would change. Instead, he became unpredictable, pressuring her, questioning her, demanding decisions she wasn't ready to make. When she finally stepped away from him, choosing peace over promises, he didn't accept it. He simply waited for a moment when she was vulnerable enough for him to push again. Tonight, apparently, was that moment. Yet Evelyn was not the same woman she had been months earlier. Through morning sickness, long shifts, and planning for a future with 2 babies on her own, she found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She had friends at the hospital who respected her, patients who appreciated her kindness, and a growing sense of purpose that fueled her through sleepless nights. The twins had become her anchor, her reason to keep moving, breathing, believing. As Damien hovered near the door, Evelyn straightened her spine. She would not let fear swallow her, not tonight. The babies kicked beneath her ribs, and she placed a steady hand over her belly, silently promising them she would protect them at any cost. But before she could speak again, the figure from the hallway stepped into view, stopping just behind Damien. The overhead light caught on a silver watch, a crisp suit jacket, and an expression Evelyn had not expected to see tonight. Her breath stalled as recognition washed over her, turning the moment into something far more complicated than she had feared only seconds earlier. The man watching them was Lucas Hale. Lucas Hale did not belong in a dim hospital corridor at 9 in the evening, yet he stood there with the calm posture of a man who made decisions in boardrooms overlooking Park Avenue. His presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Damien stiffened, his confidence cracking at the edges, while Evelyn felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty rise in her chest. Lucas was someone she knew from the hospital's charity events, a polished, reserved man whose kindness never felt forced. She had seen him greet nurses with genuine warmth and donate quietly without expecting acknowledgement. But she had never seen him look quite like this, alert, sharp, wary. "Everything all right here?" Lucas asked, his voice steady, though his eyes were already reading the tension in the room. They moved from Evelyn's pale face to the belt in Damien's hand, then back again, piecing together more than either of them said out loud. Damien responded with a quick, practiced smile. "Just a personal matter. Nothing to concern you." Lucas didn't return the smile. "Personal matters can still be inappropriate in a hospital," he said evenly. Evelyn felt the air thicken. She didn't want a confrontation, not with her body preparing to bring 2 lives into the world. But she also couldn't let Damien continue his psychological pressure. She tried to find her voice, to explain, but her throat tightened again, a familiar reaction whenever Damien was too close. Lucas noticed. He stepped closer, not aggressively, but protectively, placing himself at an angle that allowed Evelyn to feel safer without making the situation explode. "If Evelyn needs space, I think we should all respect that." Damien's jaw tightened. "This is none of your business, Hale." "Possibly," Lucas replied calmly. "Or possibly it is." Those words carried more weight than Evelyn expected. She saw something flicker in Damien's expression. Recognition. Maybe even fear. It didn't make sense yet, but the shift was unmistakable. "Lucas," Evelyn finally whispered, her voice soft but clear, "I'm all right. I just need Damien to give me some time. I need peace before surgery." Lucas gave her a gentle nod. "You deserve that." Damien let out a low exhale, clearly frustrated that his intimidation wasn't working the way he wanted. He turned back toward Evelyn, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "We will continue this conversation," he whispered, each word landing like a cold drop of water. "Soon." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Not here," she begged inwardly. "Not tonight." Damien straightened his coat and stepped past Lucas, but not before offering him a glare filled with warnings. Lucas remained still, the picture of composed resistance, until Damien finally disappeared around the corner. The hallway grew quieter, softer. Evelyn's entire body loosened, as if strings that had been pulled too tight finally eased. Lucas waited a moment before speaking. "Do you want me to call security, or someone from administration?" Evelyn shook her head quickly. "No, not now. I don't want to make everything messier." "You're not making anything messy," Lucas said gently. "You're protecting yourself." Evelyn let out a shaky breath. She wasn't used to anyone defending her, especially not someone like Lucas Hale, a man whose days were filled with meetings, strategic plans, and the quiet elegance of people who lived in Upper East Side buildings with doormen. Yet here he was, looking at her like her well-being mattered. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "You don't owe me an apology," Lucas replied softly, "but you do deserve support, even if it's just someone standing nearby." Evelyn felt her eyes sting unexpectedly. She blinked, steadying herself. She didn't want to cry, not yet, not here. Before she could answer, a nurse hurried toward them. "Evelyn, we're getting ready for prep. Can you come with me?" Evelyn nodded, gripping the rails of her bed as she shifted. But as she turned, she noticed Lucas watching her, with the kind of concern that made her heart pound for reasons she wasn't ready to name. And then she realized Lucas wasn't leaving. He intended to stay. Damian Cross did not exit the building as quietly as he pretended. While Evelyn was being guided toward the prep room, he stalked down the hallway with a storm brewing behind his eyes, his polished shoes striking the floor with calculated force. Anyone passing him might have mistaken him for a stressed father-to-be, but beneath the neat coat, the sleek watch, and the businessman's composure was a man unraveling one thread at a time. And Evelyn knew it better than anyone. The prep room door closed behind her, muffling the busy sounds of the hospital. A nurse adjusted her IV, while another checked her vitals. Evelyn tried focusing on her breathing, but her thoughts kept pulling her back to the moment Damian appeared. His presence had dragged her into a place she never wanted to return to, a place filled with anxiety she had worked so hard to escape. She touched her belly gently, whispering to her babies that she would keep them safe, no matter how hard it became. Meanwhile, Lucas Hale lingered outside the room, arms crossed, eyes narrowed in thought. He replayed the scene he had just witnessed, noting Damian's expression, not only anger, but recognition. Damian knew who Lucas was, and that alone raised questions. Lucas didn't involve himself in personal conflicts unless necessary, yet something about Evelyn, her trembling hands, her brave attempt to remain composed, made him certain that stepping away would haunt him. He wasn't the type to ignore red flags. A nurse walked by, glancing at him. "You can wait in the family area if you want," she said kindly. Lucas nodded, though he didn't move. Family. The word lingered strangely. He wasn't family, but he didn't like the idea of leaving Evelyn without a witness. After a few minutes, curiosity tugged him toward the waiting area. It was quiet, with soft lighting and a view of the Manhattan skyline in the distance. He sat down, though his mind kept circling back to Damian's hostility. Damian, meanwhile, stopped near the elevators, pulling out his phone. He dialed someone, pacing slow enough that his agitation slipped through every movement. "She's close," he murmured sharply. "No, I don't care about the risk. I need those documents signed before the board meets next week. Without that transfer, everything falls apart." He paused, listening, his jaw tightened. "I told you, Evelyn owes me. She'll break eventually, she always does." His voice dropped to a cold whisper. "She has to." He ended the call abruptly, not noticing that someone had stepped around the corner. A young resident, holding a tablet, looked startled to have overheard anything. Damian's eyes snapped to him. The resident immediately lowered his gaze and hurried away. Damian exhaled slowly, trying to regain control, but the mask he wore so easily was slipping. Back in the prep room, Evelyn closed her eyes, recalling every subtle pattern of Damian's behavior over the past year. The conversations disguised as concern. The pressure disguised as love. The promises woven into expectations she could never meet. She had wanted to believe in him once. She had wanted a family, a chance at stability, something warm to replace the cold memories of her childhood. But Damian wanted ownership, not partnership. A soft knock at the door brought her back. A nurse peeked in. "Prep will take a bit longer, sweetheart. Do you need someone to sit with you?" Evelyn hesitated. She didn't want to burden anyone, but she also didn't want to be alone with her thoughts and the fear creeping along her spine. "Is Lucas still outside?" she asked quietly. The nurse smiled gently. "He hasn't moved." Evelyn felt something warm settle in her chest, confusing, unfamiliar, comforting. "Can you tell him he can come in? Just until prep is done." "Of course." A minute later, Lucas stepped inside, his presence steadying the room without a word. Evelyn exhaled softly, her fear loosening just a little. But elsewhere in the hospital, Damian pressed the elevator button with burning impatience, already plotting his next move. He wasn't done, not even close. The prep room felt calmer, with Lucas sitting quietly beside Evelyn, but calm was a thin shell tonight, fragile, trembling, too easy to crack. She lay on the hospital bed, hands folded over her rounded belly, trying to steady her breath as machines beeped in soft, rhythmic patterns around her. Lucas didn't speak at first. He simply remained close, offering presence instead of questions, and that alone made Evelyn's throat tighten with gratitude she wasn't sure how to express. "You don't have to stay," she murmured, though part of her hoped he would. Lucas shook his head gently. "I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." His voice was quiet, anchored, the way people spoke when they meant every syllable. It contrasted sharply with the tension that still lingered in the air, the kind Damien always carried like a shadow. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm the wave of nerves washing through her chest, but the memory of Damien standing above her door would not fade. She opened her eyes again. "He wasn't supposed to know I was here. I didn't tell anyone besides the hospital staff." Lucas studied her carefully. "Then someone told him," he said, "or he was watching you more closely than you realized." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "He shouldn't have any reason to. We're not together. I made that clear months ago." "Some people don't accept losing control," Lucas replied, almost as if speaking from experience. "Especially men like him." Before Evelyn could ask what that meant, the prep room door opened. The same young resident who had overheard Damien earlier stepped inside, a nervous stiffness in his posture. He glanced at Lucas before turning to Evelyn. "Miss Hart, I'm just checking your monitoring equipment," he said, but his voice wavered slightly, and Lucas caught it immediately. When the resident leaned closer to the machine, he whispered just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. He was making calls outside the elevator. He sounded determined. "Be careful." Evelyn's breath hitched. Lucas's jaw tightened. "Thank you," Lucas said, his voice low but firm. The resident nodded quickly and slipped out of the room. Evelyn pressed a hand to her forehead. "This can't be happening tonight, not when I'm about to have the babies." Lucas leaned forward. "Listen to me. Whatever Damien wants from you, it's not going to happen. You're safe here." But even as he said the words, neither of them knew that safety in a hospital could shift in seconds. Outside, Damien had made his way to the administrative wing. He walked with purpose, his coat swaying behind him, his expression composed again as if he'd clipped his anger back into place. At the reception desk, he flashed a friendly smile. "Hi, I'm here regarding a patient, Evelyn Hart. I need access to her file. There are urgent legal documents related to the birth." The receptionist frowned politely. "I'm sorry, but patient files are protected. Only authorized individuals." "I am authorized," Damien interjected, placing a crisp card on the desk. It had his company's logo on it, official enough to confuse anyone who wasn't trained. But before the receptionist could respond, a hospital administrator walked by. She recognized him instantly, not from Evelyn, but from a red flag alert placed earlier that month. "Mr. Cross," she said slowly, her expression flattening, "you were explicitly notified that all matters regarding Miss Hart must go through legal channels. You need to leave this area." Damien's smile tightened, the charm fading. "You don't understand. I'm the father of her children. Biology does not override safety protocol." Her words hit him harder than he expected. His fingers curled. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. The administrator didn't flinch. "Security has already been alerted. You have 2 minutes to exit this floor." Damien stepped back, but only physically. Inside, a plan was tightening. He wouldn't leave, not truly. Not without getting what he came for. Back in the prep room, Evelyn felt a sudden tug of instinct and intuition sharpened by months of pressure. "Lucas," she whispered, "he's not done. I can feel it." Lucas straightened, eyes darkening with resolve. "Then neither am I." And the hospital night shifted again. Evelyn had always believed she could push through anything if she stayed quiet long enough, breathed deeply enough, held herself together tightly enough. But as the minutes passed inside the prep room, something inside her began to crack in a way she couldn't hide anymore. The soft hum of the machines, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the faint voices drifting in from the hallway, each sound seemed to echo louder, stretch further, tug harder at the edges of her composure. Her body was preparing for labor, but her mind was spiraling under a different kind of pressure. She pressed a hand over her belly, feeling one of the babies shift beneath her ribs. "Not now," she whispered, Not to them, but to the rising panic threatening to swallow her. Please, not right now. Lucas stood near the foot of the bed, watching her carefully. He wasn't a doctor, but he had spent enough time around medical teams to recognize when someone was reaching their emotional limit. Evelyn's breathing wasn't just uneven, it trembled, her shoulders shook, her eyes glistened with a panic she was trying too hard to hide. "Evelyn," he said gently, stepping closer, "look at me." She tried, but the moment her gaze met his, the strength she'd been clinging to slipped like sand between her fingers. Tears welled up, spilling before she could drag them back. "I can't do this," she choked out. "I can't do all of this at once. Damien, the babies, the surgery." Her voice broke. "I'm not strong enough." Lucas knelt beside her bed, his tone steady but soft. "You have been strong every day for months. You've carried 2 lives, worked long shifts, built everything on your own. You're stronger than you think." She shook her head fast, wiping her cheeks with shaking hands. "You don't understand. Every time I think I'm safe, he shows up. Every time I try to move forward, he pulls me back." Her breaths came quicker, sharp and shallow. "I thought he was gone. I thought he finally accepted that I wanted peace." Lucas's expression shifted, something firm settling behind his calm. "People like him don't accept peace," he said. "They accept control." Evelyn clenched her jaw, tears streaking down her face. "I hate that he still scares me. I hate that I can't turn off the fear." "You're not supposed to turn it off," Lucas answered. "Fear is human, but fear doesn't mean you're powerless." She covered her face with both hands, trying to slow her racing thoughts. But Damien's voice, Damien's presence, Damien's demands, they replayed like shadows whispering from every direction. Her body trembled again. She felt small, cornered, overwhelmed. Lucas noticed the rising panic and placed a steadying hand on the bed rail, not touching her, just anchoring the moment. "Evelyn, you're not alone right now. I'm here. The nurses are here. Security is aware. Damien can't get to you, not tonight." His certainty was the only thing stopping her from completely breaking down. But Evelyn's mind kept leaping ahead past the surgery, past the birth, toward the future she feared Damien would corrupt. Her chest tightened again. What if he does something later? What if he takes me to court? What if he tries to take the babies? Lucas exhaled slowly. "Then we'll deal with it, legally, strategically. You won't be facing him alone, I promise you that." His words stunned her. "Why? Why would you help me?" Lucas held her gaze. "Because no one deserves to face a moment like this without support." Her throat tightened as fresh tears gathered. She had been alone for so long that kindness, real, steady kindness, felt almost foreign. Just then, a contraction tightened across her abdomen. Evelyn gasped, gripping the sheets as her breath caught. Lucas stood instantly. "I'll get the nurse." But before he reached the door, they heard hurried footsteps, voices clashing in the hallway. The nurse rushed in, wide-eyed. "Evelyn, honey, stay calm. Something's happening outside." Evelyn's heart dropped. "Is it Damien?" The nurse hesitated, and that hesitation told Evelyn everything. The storm wasn't over. The prep room door closed behind the nurse, leaving Evelyn and Lucas suspended in a silence that felt too heavy to breathe through. The contractions slowly eased, but the tension in Evelyn's chest did not. She watched the nurse's retreating figure, her pulse racing, her thoughts spiraling in a dozen directions at once. Something was happening in the hallway, something she wasn't being told. And silence, when it came to Damien, was never a good sign. Lucas stepped closer to the door, listening, his jaw tight. "Let me check what's going on," he said quietly. Evelyn reached out, grabbing his wrist before he could take another step. "No, don't leave me alone. Not right now." Lucas paused, softening immediately at the tremor in her voice. He moved back toward her, pulling a chair closer. "All right, I'll stay." Her grip slowly relaxed, though her anxiety didn't fade. She leaned back against the pillows, breathing shakily. "Why won't anyone tell me what's happening out there?" Lucas hesitated not long. Just enough for Evelyn to see the truth, even before he said it. "They're trying not to stress you," he admitted. "They know you're close to going into labor." Evelyn closed her eyes, frustration tightening her chest. "But keeping me in the dark is stressing me more." Lucas inhaled deeply, as though weighing his next words carefully. "Evelyn," the administrator recognized Damien earlier, "not because of you, but because he's been flagged." Evelyn's eyes snapped open. "Flagged? What does that mean?" Lucas looked at her with a level seriousness she had never seen in his expression before. It means the hospital has dealt with him before. He's been involved in disputes here. Not violent ones, he clarified gently, but enough to raise concerns. Her stomach turned. Damien had always been unpredictable, but she never imagined his behavior extended beyond their private world. "Why didn't I know?" she whispered. "Because men like him hide the parts that don't fit their image," Lucas replied gently. "And they hide them well." Evelyn leaned back, absorbing the revelation. Damien wasn't just manipulative, he was more entangled in trouble than she ever realized. The thought made her breath stutter. She had spent so long blaming herself for not seeing the warning signs. But now, hearing this, she understood she hadn't missed them. Damien had buried them. Before she could fully process the weight of that truth, the door opened again. This time, it was the young resident, the one who had overheard Damien earlier. He stepped inside cautiously, glancing at Lucas before addressing Evelyn. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he began, "but I thought you should know. Security is escorting Mr. Cross out of the maternal wing. He tried to access a restricted area." Evelyn's pulse spiked. "Is he gone?" The resident shifted. "He's leaving the floor, but he's upset." Upset was too small a word for a man like Damien Cross. Evelyn felt her chest tighten again. Lucas stood. "Thank you for telling us. We'll keep her calm." The resident nodded and slipped out. Evelyn's breath hitched. "Lucas, he's not going to give up. I know him. This isn't over." Lucas sat on the edge of her bed, not touching her, but close enough for his steadiness to reach her. "You're right. It's not over." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Then what do I do?" Lucas held her gaze. "First, you focus on bringing your babies safely into the world. Everything else." He paused, voice lowering. "Everything else, you won't face alone." She blinked, startled. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." Lucas looked away for a moment, gathering something unspoken. When he met her eyes again, there was a shadow there, something personal, something deep. "Because I know what it feels like to watch someone fall apart under the weight of the wrong person," he said quietly. "And I promised myself I would never stand by and watch it happen again." Evelyn froze. "Again?" Before she could ask what he meant, a voice echoed from the hallway, a voice she recognized instantly. Not Damien's. Someone older, firmer. "Where is my daughter?" Evelyn's heart stopped. Her father had arrived. For a moment, Evelyn thought she had imagined the voice. It had been years, too many years since she last heard it. Time had a way of distorting memories, softening them until they barely resembled the truth. But this voice cut through the hallway with unmistakable authority, wrapped in something she had forgotten how to feel around him. Protection. Lucas rose from his chair instantly, his eyes shifting toward the door. Evelyn's breath caught as heavy footsteps approached, steady and certain, not rushed, not hesitant. The door eased open, and a tall man with graying hair and a neatly pressed coat stepped inside. He carried the calm confidence of someone who lived his life making difficult decisions, the kind that shaped companies and futures alike. But the moment his gaze fell on Evelyn, the executive edge softened, replaced by something raw. "Evelyn," he breathed, as if saying her name for the first time in years. Her pulse stumbled. "Dad?" Richard Hart looked older than she remembered, but not weaker. His shoulders were still broad, his expression still firm, and his eyes, those familiar, storm-colored eyes, held a mixture of regret, worry, and fierce resolve. He stepped closer, but not too close, leaving space for her to decide whether she wanted him near. "You're here," Evelyn whispered, disbelief trembling through her voice. "How did you even know?" Richard exhaled slowly. "I should have been here long before tonight, but someone called me." He glanced briefly at Lucas, then back to his daughter, "Someone who believed you needed support." Evelyn turned to Lucas, stunned. "You called my father?" Lucas shook his head lightly. "No, not directly. But when security flagged Damien, the hospital ran a secondary alert connected to a name on file someone listed years ago as an emergency contact. Your father responded." Evelyn stared at Lucas, dazed. "I didn't even remember listing him." "It was a long time ago," Richard said softly, "but I was still there on the paperwork." The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with emotions Evelyn had kept locked inside. Abandonment, confusion, old hurt, and a longing she never allowed herself to name. She swallowed, looking away. "Why did you come now?" After all these years? Richard's expression tightened with remorse. Because I heard the situation was serious, and I couldn't stand the thought of you facing it alone. His words rippled through her chest. Memories of her teenage years, lonely dinners, unanswered calls, birthdays marked by silence rushed up like a tide. She blinked hard, trying to hold back the sting in her eyes. You left, she whispered. You just left. Richard's face crumpled at the edges. I did. And I regret it every single day. But I'm here now to do whatever you need. Tonight and beyond. Before Evelyn could respond, another contraction surged through her abdomen. She gasped, gripping the bed rail. Richard stepped forward instinctively, but Lucas reached her side first, steadying her breathing, helping her count through the pain. When it passed, her father watched them both with a mixture of grief and gratitude. She shouldn't be stressed like this, Richard murmured. Where is the man causing all this trouble? Lucas exchanged a look with him. Security has escorted him out for now, but he's not someone who quits easily. Richard's jaw tightened. Then he'll deal with me next. Evelyn stiffened. Dad, no. Evelyn, Richard said firmly. Anyone who threatens my daughter will answer to me. I should have done that years ago. The truth was out there now. Heavy but necessary. This was a man who walked away once, but not this time. Not tonight. A nurse entered, checking Evelyn's monitors. She's progressing quickly. We'll need to move her to the delivery room soon. Richard stepped aside, giving space, but his eyes never left Evelyn. I'm staying, sweetheart. Whether you want me in the room or just outside the door, your call, but I'm not leaving again. Evelyn inhaled shakily, overwhelmed but no longer alone, and as Lucas stood on one side and Richard on the other, she realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. She finally had protection. Evelyn had imagined giving birth, surrounded by calm voices, warm lights, and gentle encouragement. Instead, the energy around her felt like a storm gathering in the middle of Manhattan, an uneasy mix of urgency, fear, and unexpected alliances. Nurses moved briskly in and out of the prep room as the delivery team prepared the final steps. Machines chimed softly, their steady rhythm reminding her that time was closing in. The twins were coming soon, with or without chaos outside. Her father stood near the window, shoulders squared, hands clasped behind his back. He looked like a man preparing for a negotiation he could not afford to lose. Lucas stood closer, watching Evelyn, offering reassurance through quiet presence rather than words. The contrast between the two men, one bound by blood, one by empathy, strangely comforted her. But the tension was undeniable. It clung to the air like static. Has security confirmed he left the building? Richard asked, turning toward Lucas, though his voice remained low to avoid alarming Evelyn. Lucas nodded once. They said he exited through the main lobby, but that doesn't guarantee anything. He could be waiting elsewhere. Evelyn swallowed hard. He'll come back. Damien never walks away without forcing the last word. Her father's eyes darkened. If he tries, he won't get far. Evelyn didn't doubt that. Richard Hart carried the authority of a man who had spent decades leading negotiations on Wall Street. He wasn't loud or intimidating, but he had a way of speaking that made people listen. She had forgotten how powerful that presence could be, forgotten, or perhaps blocked it out after he left. Another contraction hit, stronger than the last. She gripped the bed rail with a soft gasp, her breath shaking. Lucas stepped forward immediately. Breathe with me, he said quietly. In and out, slow and steady. She followed his rhythm until the pain eased. Her father watched helplessly, wanting to fix something he couldn't touch. The door opened again, and the hospital administrator stepped inside. Miss Hart, we're moving you to the delivery suite now, she said gently. Your babies are ready. Evelyn nodded, nerves tightening in her stomach. The administrator turned to Richard and Lucas. She can have one support person in the delivery room. The room stilled. Evelyn looked from her father to Lucas, two men she trusted in completely different ways. Her heart squeezed. How was she supposed to choose? Richard took a slow breath, then stepped forward. Sweetheart, he murmured, placing a hand on her shoulder. This moment is about you, and you should have whoever makes you feel most secure with you. His voice didn't tremble, but she saw the emotion flicker behind his composed exterior. He was giving her permission to choose, even if it hurt him. Lucas glanced down, ready to step aside. Your father should be with you, he said softly. He came back for a reason. Evelyn shook her head. That's not the only reason. She looked at Lucas, then really looked at him. At the steadiness in his eyes, the calm strength he had given her all night, the way he anchored her breathing without asking for anything in return. "Lucas," she whispered, "I want you with me." Silence stretched for a heartbeat. Richard blinked, surprised, but then nodded slowly. "I'll be right outside," he said, his voice warm. "And when those babies arrive, I'll be the first one waiting to hold them." Emotion swelled in Evelyn's chest as the nurses prepared to move her. Lucas stepped beside her, offering his hand, not insisting, just offering. She took it without hesitation. As the bed began rolling toward the delivery suite, Evelyn felt fear and hope colliding inside her. The hallway blurred with movement, voices, and light. But at her side, Lucas stayed steady. For the first time that night, she believed she might actually get through this. But at the far end of the corridor, unseen by her, an elevator door slid open, and someone stepped out. The storm was not done with her yet. The delivery suite glowed with soft amber lights, calm by design, yet nothing about the moment felt calm to Evelyn. Nurses adjusted equipment while Lucas stayed beside her, a steady anchor in a night filled with storms. Her father waited outside, paced outside, prayed outside. She could almost feel his presence through the walls. But as the door shut, sealing the room, a tremor of unease crept through her. She sensed the shift before anyone spoke, as if the hospital itself held its breath, waiting for something long buried to surface at last. Dr. Miller entered with a clipboard, her expression thoughtful rather than urgent. She approached Evelyn with a gentleness that eased some tension, but not enough. "Before we continue," she said softly, "there is a medical detail we discovered earlier tonight that you have the right to know." Evelyn's pulse quickened. The room dimmed at the edges. Lucas stepped closer, sensing her fear rise again. Dr. Miller glanced between them, then continued. "We ran a preliminary genetic panel due to a minor irregularity on the fetal monitor. It revealed something unexpected, something concerning the father." Evelyn froze. The word father hit harder than any contraction. She felt Lucas tense beside her, though he stayed silent. Dr. Miller continued carefully. "The panel showed markers that do not align with the information you provided about the father's identity." Evelyn blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" "Damien is the father." The doctor hesitated. "Biologically, the panel suggests otherwise." The room spun briefly. Evelyn shook her head in disbelief. "That's impossible." Dr. Miller softened her tone. "We will confirm after delivery, but the early markers are clear. Whoever the biological father is, it may not be Damien Cross." Silence swallowed the room. Lucas's expression shifted not in shock, but in recognition, as if puzzle pieces he'd been studying for hours finally clicked into place. Evelyn saw it. "Lucas, you knew something." He swallowed, choosing his words. "I didn't know this, but I suspected Damien wasn't being truthful about many parts of his life." The doctor stepped back to give them space. Evelyn's world tilted again, but not from fear, this time from an unraveling truth she never expected. If Damien wasn't the father, then everything he had threatened, everything he had demanded, everything he claimed ownership over it, all collapsed at once. Her breath trembled. "Then who is the father?" she whispered. But before Dr. Miller could answer, a nurse stepped in urgently. "We need to move now. The twins are ready." The timing struck like fate just as truth cracked open. The world demanded her strength again. Lucas squeezed her hand lightly. "You don't have to understand everything right now. Just focus on the babies." Evelyn nodded, though her mind spun. As they wheeled her toward the delivery suite, she caught a final glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal of the door. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked awakened. But outside the suite, unseen by Evelyn, Richard Hart stood frozen as a man approached him, the same man who had stepped from the elevator moments earlier. The stranger handed Richard a sealed envelope with a quiet urgency. "Mr. Hart," he said, "you need to see this before your daughter delivers. It concerns the truth about the twins." Richard opened the envelope with trembling hands, scanning the first page. His eyes widened, breath-catching. Whatever he read, whatever truth had been buried, wasn't just unexpected, it was devastating. And it changed everything he thought he knew. He closed the envelope slowly, realizing the truth would reshape his daughter's life more than she imagined. Richard Hart stood in the hallway, the sealed envelope heavy in his hands, as if paper alone could tilt the axis of an entire life. The walls around him hummed with urgent footsteps and low hospital voices, but he heard none of it. His world had narrowed to a few typed lines, shocking, disorienting, impossible to unsee. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. He had come tonight prepared to confront Damien Cross, prepared to repair the years he had lost with his daughter. But nothing had prepared him for this. The envelope contained a private investigator's report, delivered by the quiet man who now waited at the end of the hallway, hands clasped. Richard approached him slowly. "How long have you had this?" he asked, voice low but controlled. 3 days, the investigator replied. "We attempted to reach you earlier, but you were traveling. When we learned your daughter had been admitted tonight, we came immediately." Richard nodded stiffly. "Thank you." But gratitude felt foreign. The truth inside the report was still burning through him. He returned to the waiting bench, sat heavily, and read the final paragraph again. Markers from the preliminary genetic panel suggested not only that Damien wasn't the biological father, but that the biological father shared a genetic relationship with Evelyn herself. A cold realization struck. Richard pressed a hand against his forehead. No. That couldn't be true. The investigation detailed that the markers belonged to a specific lineage traced through hospital-donated genetic material. 2 decades earlier, Richard had quietly contributed to a medical research program that distributed anonymous donor material to fertility clinics for limited testing. The program was discontinued soon after, but the records remained sealed. Until tonight. The investigator approached him again. "Sir, the samples match yours. There's an over 99% likelihood." Richard felt the ground beneath him tilt. "You're telling me?" "Yes," the man said gently. "Your daughter is carrying twins who are biologically related to you, but through medically authorized donor material from years ago. It appears Damien learned fragments of this months ago, but misinterpreted the findings, assuming infidelity rather than donor tracing." Richard closed his eyes, overwhelmed. No wrongdoing had occurred, not ethically, not legally, but the emotional weight was staggering. Evelyn had conceived through a clinic during her brief separation from Damien, seeking a safe path to motherhood. She had never known the donor's identity. She had never imagined it could connect back to her father's past. He inhaled deeply. What would this truth do to her? She was already fragile, already bracing herself for delivery, for danger, for survival. How could she carry one more revelation, especially one so complex? The delivery room doors opened briefly as nurses moved equipment. Richard glimpsed his daughter on the bed, Lucas at her side, her hand gripping his. She looked scared, but she also looked determined. Richard felt a painful swell of pride. She had built this strength on her own. The investigator's voice softened. "Sir, the clinic records confirm everything was done ethically and anonymously. Your daughter did nothing wrong, and neither did you." Richard nodded, but his heart still twisted. "She deserves stability. She deserves truth, but not tonight." "No, sir, tonight she needs peace." Richard folded the envelope carefully, as if handling something breakable. He slipped it into his coat, his expression shifting from shock to quiet resolve. Whatever storms awaited later, whatever explanations, whatever healing, he would face them beside her, not above her. He would not abandon her again. A nurse approached. "Mr. Hart, she's progressing quickly. You can wait right outside the door." Richard straightened, nodding. "I'll be here." But as he took his place by the delivery room entrance, he felt a tremor in the pit of his stomach. Because he knew something Evelyn did not. The truth about the twins would change everything. Richard stood outside the delivery room, the envelope heavy in his coat pocket, though the weight he felt was heavier still. He stared at the double doors, at the light glowing above them, and at the nurses moving with focused urgency. Inside, his daughter was bringing 2 new lives into the world. Nothing could matter more than that in this moment. But the truth he had learned simmered beneath his ribs, demanding clarity, demanding action, demanding careful handling. He pulled the envelope out again, opening it slowly, reading every word for the 4th time. When he first glanced through the report, shock had clouded his understanding. It was only now, calmer, that he caught what he had missed in his initial panic. One line printed neatly under the genetic summary. Biological markers indicate a familial match to the Hart lineage. specifically through extended genetic relation to Mr. Richard Hart. The donor identification corresponds to a registered cousin donor participant, not Mr. Hart himself. He exhaled sharply, relief flooding through him so fast it nearly made him dizzy. He wasn't the donor, he wasn't the father of his daughter's children. The samples belonged to his late cousin, a man who had participated in a medical donor program 20 years earlier, anonymously, ethically, legally. The miscommunication came from Damien, who had obtained incomplete clinic information and assumed the worst, drawing conclusions that never should have been drawn. Richard steadied himself against the wall. The truth didn't shatter Evelyn's world, it protected it. Her babies were connected to her family through a distant branch, nothing harmful or scandalous, no wrongdoing, no violation, no shame, just biology traced through a name Damien didn't understand. The investigator approached quietly, as if sensing the shift. "You understand now, sir?" Richard nodded slowly. "I do. The donor wasn't me, it was my cousin. We shared enough genetic markers that the preliminary panel linked the lines." "Correct," the investigator said. "And Damien only saw the initial surname hit. He never obtained the full report." Richard's jaw clenched. He used incomplete information to manipulate her, to make her believe she owed him, that she'd done something wrong. "Exactly, sir." Richard closed the envelope with new clarity. Evelyn never needed to carry shame. The truth was much simpler, much gentler. And if Damien had known the real story, he might never have claimed the children as leverage in the first place. From down the hallway, a sudden commotion echoed, soft voices rising, hurried steps approaching. Lucas emerged briefly from inside the delivery room, his expression tense but controlled. He quickly approached Richard. "She's dilating fast. The twins will be here soon, and she's holding herself together. But Damien..." He lowered his voice. "He's back in the building." Richard felt anger simmer, calm but deep. "Security said he left." "He did," Lucas replied, "but he came back through a side entrance. They're trying to intercept him now." Richard exhaled sharply. "He's not getting anywhere near her." Lucas's eyes darkened. "Agreed." A security officer turned the corner, heading straight toward them. "Mr. Hart, Mr. Hale, your presence is requested near the service hallway. We have reason to believe Mr. Cross is attempting to access staff-only areas." Richard exchanged a look with Lucas. It was a look of unity, of protection, of knowing they were standing on the same side of the line. "I'm not leaving my daughter," Richard said. "You won't have to," Lucas replied. "I'll go. Keep this hallway safe." Richard nodded once, a silent pact forming between them. Lucas followed the officer down the hall, moving with purpose. Richard stayed at the delivery room door, the envelope tucked safely away, his hand pressed against the cool metal. Inside, his daughter was fighting her way toward motherhood. Outside, he would fight the shadows trying to reach her. And though Evelyn did not know it yet, the truth that once threatened to break her would soon become the strength that protected her future. Lucas followed the security officer through the dim service hallway, the fluorescent lights above flickering as if sensing the tension pulsing through the air. The hospital's polished public corridors were replaced by quieter back routes used only by staff, an eerie contrast to the warmth of the delivery suite where Evelyn fought through labor. Lucas walked with measured steps, but inside he burned with a quiet determination. He was not going to let Damien Cross slip through another crack tonight. The officer stopped near a maintenance room, scanning the area. "He was spotted near here 5 minutes ago," he whispered. "We believe he tried accessing the secured stairwell." Lucas frowned. Why is he so desperate? What could he possibly gain at this point? The officer shook his head. "Some people don't accept being told no." Lucas thought of Evelyn, her pale face, her trembling breaths, her strength despite it all. "He's trying to trap her emotionally," Lucas muttered. "That's all he ever does. He won't touch her physically, but he'll corner her with fear if he can." The officer opened his mouth to respond, but a soft noise, metal shifting, barely audible, echoed from further down the hall. They both turned. The officer motioned for Lucas to stay back, but Lucas stepped forward anyway, unwilling to remain idle. As they approached the sound, Lucas spotted a shadow near the stairwell door. Damien wasn't hiding. He wasn't even moving quickly. He simply stood there with calculated calm, as if the entire hospital were a chessboard and he was still convinced he held the winning move. "Mr. Cross," the officer called out firmly, "you are not authorized to be here. You need to leave the premises immediately." Damien turned slowly, his expression void of panic, only annoyance. "I'm the father of those children. I have every right to be here." Lucas stepped forward. "You're not," he said sharply. The preliminary panel disproved it. For the first time, Damien's mask cracked. His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Lucas didn't raise his voice. "You heard me. You've been lying to yourself and to Evelyn for months. You used scraps of information to manipulate her, but it's over." Damien's jaw clenched, a thin line forming where calm should be. "You think some incomplete test changes everything? She still owes me." "She owes you nothing," Lucas interrupted. The officer stepped between them. "Mr. Cross, you need to leave now before this becomes a legal issue." Damien shot Lucas, a glare that carried months of obsession behind it. "You think you're the hero here, Hale? You think she'll pick you over me?" Lucas didn't flinch. "I'm not here for her to pick me. I'm here to keep her safe." Damien opened his mouth to retaliate, but the officer moved closer, radio already in hand. Damien finally stepped back, but not in surrender. He stared at Lucas with a cold, calculated look. "This isn't over," he muttered. "You haven't seen the last of me." Lucas held his gaze. "Actually, I hope we have." Security escorted Damien down the hallway, their voices fading around the corner until silence returned. Lucas exhaled slowly, tension finally easing from his shoulders. But the night wasn't done with him yet. He hurried back toward the delivery wing, boots echoing against the polished floor. Every step carried the same thought. Evelyn needs to be protected. She's facing enough. As he turned the corner, he saw Richard still standing guard, posture rigid, worry etched deep in his expression. Richard looked up immediately. "Well?" he asked. "He's gone," Lucas said. Security escorted him out of the restricted areas. Richard nodded once, relief softening the stern lines of his face. "Good." Lucas stepped closer to the delivery room door, listening to the muffled voices inside. "How is she?" Richard exhaled, eyes softening. "She's fighting, she's scared, but she's strong." Lucas felt something tighten in his chest. She shouldn't have to be scared at all. A nurse passed by then, pausing just long enough to speak. "She's ready," the nurse said. "It's almost time." Lucas and Richard exchanged a look, a silent understanding that from this point forward, the night would shift again. And inside the delivery room, Evelyn gripped the sheets, unaware of the battles being fought just outside her door. Because the next battle she faced was her own. Inside the delivery room, Evelyn felt the world narrow to a single point of focus. The bright surgical lights above her glowed softly, casting halos over the medical team as they prepared instruments and checked monitors. Her breaths came unevenly at first, fear still clung to her ribs like a second skin, but she forced herself into a rhythm. In and out, slow, controlled. She had to stay grounded, she had to stay present. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for the two tiny lives, pressing urgently toward the world. Lucas re-entered moments later, slipping into the seat beside her, with a calm that steadied her breath instantly. His presence didn't overpower the room, it softened it. He leaned close enough for her to hear him, but not close enough to crowd her. "You're doing incredibly well," he murmured. "I'm right here." Evelyn nodded, gripping his hand. Her fingers trembled, but her grip was strong. Dr. Miller checked her progress again, her voice warm and encouraging. "Evelyn, you're nearly there. The babies are in a good position. We just need you to stay focused." "I'm trying," Evelyn whispered. I'm so scared." Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "Being scared doesn't mean you're not strong. You're doing this. Nobody else. You." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She didn't need to hide her fear anymore. Not from him. Not tonight. Then another contraction hit sharp, demanding, consuming. Evelyn gasped, trying to keep her breathing steady. The doctor helped guide her through it, talking her through every step. Evelyn pushed, her strength building with each wave of pain. Between contractions, she felt a strange, unexpected calm settle in her chest. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe adrenaline, maybe the relief of knowing Damien was no longer lurking outside the door. Or maybe it was something deeper, something awakening inside her. For the first time in months, Evelyn realized she wasn't surviving tonight alone. She had Lucas beside her. She had her father outside. She had a medical team who cared. She had herself, her own will, her own courage, her own heart. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't trapped. She was rising. Another contraction surged. Evelyn cried out, but this time, the fear didn't take over. Her voice echoed with determination rather than panic. Lucas leaned closer, guiding her breathing again, matching her pace, anchoring her through the chaos. "You're almost there," he murmured. "Just a little more." Evelyn nodded, tears streaking her face. "I can do this." "Yes," Lucas whispered, "you can." And in that moment, Evelyn believed him. Minutes passed in painful, shaky waves, but then suddenly the room shifted. Dr. Miller's tone changed, bright with excitement. "Evelyn, I can see the first baby. You're doing beautifully. One more push." Evelyn gathered the last of her strength, gripping Lucas's hand with everything she had. She pushed through the pain, through the fear, through the exhaustion. A tiny cry pierced the room. Evelyn's breath broke into a sob, a soft, overwhelmed sound that carried every emotion she'd held inside for months. The nurse lifted a small, warm, wriggling baby into her arms, and Evelyn stared in awe, touching the soft cheek with trembling fingers. "My baby," she whispered. "My beautiful baby." But the moment didn't end there. Dr. Miller looked up again. "Baby number 2 is coming quickly. Get ready." Evelyn steadied herself, her heart thudding with new resolve. She wasn't scared anymore. She was a mother stronger than she'd ever known, braver than she'd ever believed. Another cry soon followed the second twin, arriving with equal determination. Evelyn let out a trembling laugh, tears streaming as both babies were placed against her chest. She looked down at them with a love so fierce it warmed every corner of her soul. She had done it. She had won the first battle. But she didn't know that outside the room, where Richard stood waiting, another revelation was about to break open the night. Richard Hart paced the hallway outside the delivery suite, each step a steady drum against the polished floor. The tension in his shoulders hadn't left, even after hearing both babies' first cries through the door, a sound that nearly brought him to his knees. He had missed so much of Evelyn's life, but he would not miss this. Not anymore. A security officer approached quietly. "Mr. Hart, we've completed our search of the service wing. Damien Cross has left the building." Richard nodded, though he didn't truly relax. Damien leaving voluntarily was never a guarantee of peace. "Thank you," he murmured. As the officer walked away, Richard reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope, the one containing the genetic report that had turned his world inside out. He sat down on a bench, smoothing the creases from the paper. He read it again, slowly this time, allowing the truth to settle deeper. The donor was not him. The donor was his cousin, someone he had lost contact with years ago, someone who had passed before Evelyn even graduated from high school. The genetics had simply overlapped. The medical program had been legal, ethical, and fully anonymous. Nothing about it tainted Evelyn or the babies. But the report contained more than genetics. Buried in the second half of the investigation was something he hadn't seen in his first panicked read, something far more concerning, far more damaging to Damien than any DNA mix-up. A financial trail, a long one, and it led straight to Damien Cross. Richard leaned forward, reading the lines carefully. The investigator had uncovered falsified business records, offshore transfers, and payments disguised through Damien's company transactions tied to a loan shark network known for targeting failing executives. And then there was the most shocking part, evidence that Damien had been using Evelyn's personal information, attempting to leverage her identity to stabilize his collapsing business deals. Richard's jaw tightened. Damien hadn't come to the hospital tonight because he cared about the babies. He had come because he needed them, needed her as a shield in a financial war he could no longer manage. He had intended to pressure Evelyn into signing documents that would tie her to his failing assets. The truth hit like a blow. Damien hadn't just been manipulative. He had been planning a calculated financial trap, one that would have destroyed Evelyn if she'd agreed. Richard rose quickly, the envelope still in hand, just as Lucas turned the corner, breathless but relieved. "He's gone," Lucas said. "Security made sure he left the property." Richard nodded but didn't relax. "It won't matter. He'll come back. Not for her, he wants what she can give him." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard handed him the report. Lucas skimmed it, his eyes narrowing with every line he read. "My God," he muttered. "He was trying to use her to cover his debts." "Yes," Richard replied quietly, "and if she had signed anything he put in front of her tonight, she could have lost everything. her savings, her future. Even legal rights over the babies if the creditors pushed hard enough. Lucas's fists clenched at his sides. He knew she was vulnerable. He picked tonight on purpose. Richard nodded grimly. Because desperation makes men like him bold. They both looked toward the delivery room doors, a silent vow forming between them. Evelyn would not learn any of this tonight. Not while she was recovering. Not while she held her newborns with trembling joy. Not while her strength was still fragile. Lucas folded the report carefully and handed it back. We'll protect her from this. Richard met his eyes. Yes, we will. Together. Just then, the delivery room doors opened. A nurse stepped out with a warm smile. She's ready to see you both. Lucas glanced at Richard. You first. But Richard shook his head. No. She chose you to be in there with her. You go first. Lucas hesitated, then nodded and stepped inside. As Richard followed, he knew one thing. Tonight, the truth had shifted the battlefield, and Evelyn had allies she never expected. Lucas stepped into the recovery room quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace surrounding Evelyn. She lay propped against soft hospital pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but glowing in a way he had never seen before. In her arms were her twins, tiny, bundled in pastel blankets, their breaths soft and steady. The sight stopped him cold. For a moment, the world outside the reports, the danger, Damien's schemes faded into background noise. You made it, Evelyn whispered, her voice weak but warm. Lucas stepped closer, emotion tugging at his throat. I told you I wasn't leaving. Her tired smile deepened. Come meet them. He approached slowly, reverently. Two perfect faces peeked from the blankets, impossibly small and impossibly new. They're incredible, he murmured, genuine awe coloring every word. You did something amazing tonight. Evelyn looked down at the babies, brushing her thumb along a tiny cheek. I didn't do it alone. Before Lucas could respond, Richard stepped into the room. He paused in the doorway, a shadow of emotion crossing his face. He had seen his daughter in many stages of life, curious child, determined teen, distant young adult, but he had never seen her like this. Soft, strong, sacred. Dad, Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. Richard stepped forward, carefully, as if afraid she might vanish if he approached too quickly. Sweetheart, he murmured, you did it. She reached for him with her free hand, and he took it gently, seating himself on the other side of her bed. For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence, watching the twins breathe. This is the best moment of my life, Evelyn whispered. Nothing else matters tonight. But Lucas and Richard exchanged a look, one that said something does matter, something she deserves to know someday. Not now, but someday. A knock broke the quiet. A hospital administrator stepped in, apologetic but firm. Mr. Hart, Mr. Hale, I'm sorry, but we need both of you for something important. Evelyn stiffened. Is it Damien? No, the administrator reassured. He's been escorted off the property. This is regarding legal concerns and a security statement. Richard squeezed Evelyn's hand. We'll be right back. Lucas forced a reassuring smile. You rest, we'll handle whatever this is. But the moment they stepped into the hallway, the administrator's calm expression shifted. We found something, she said softly. You need to see it. They followed her down the corridor to a small conference room, normally used for hospital board meetings. A security officer was already there, along with a binder of printed documents, and Damien's abandoned briefcase confiscated when he attempted to enter the restricted wing. We searched his belongings, the officer explained. What we found is alarming. He opened the briefcase, revealing neatly organized folders, too organized, too practiced. Contracts. Financial transfers. A forged document with Evelyn's name typed at the bottom. She never signed this, Lucas said sharply. But he intended her to, the officer replied. Tonight. Richard's stomach turned cold. He planned to trap her. The administrator nodded grimly. And there's more. She opened a second folder, the one containing Damien's private notes. In the margins, handwritten in sharp ink, were Damien's own words. If she won't sign willingly, pressure her. Threaten custody, make her desperate. Richard felt his jaw lock, fury burning behind his ribs. Lucas's hands curled into fists. He was planning to weaponize her children against her. The administrator nodded. But this, she gestured to the evidence, This is enough to file a formal legal complaint. Temporary protection orders, fraud charges, identity misuse. She has grounds for full custody and legal action. Richard exhaled. Good. She deserves justice. Lucas nodded. And protection. The officer closed the briefcase. There's only one more step. Someone has to deliver this to the police tonight. Lucas stepped forward immediately. I'll go. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. We go together. For the first time, they stood not as two separate men in Evelyn's life, but as a united front preparing to fight for her future. The late-night air outside Mount Sinai carried a sharp Manhattan chill, the kind that cut through layers of suit fabric and demanded attention. Richard and Lucas stepped out of the hospital doors with the briefcase of evidence in hand. The city pulsed around them, yellow cabs streaking past, steam rising from grates, the distant glow of Park Avenue reflecting off glass high-rises. It felt surreal that Evelyn, exhausted and glowing with new motherhood inside the building, had no idea a legal battle was unfolding just steps away. A police cruiser waited at the curb. The officer outside nodded as they approached. Mr. Hart, Mr. Hale, we were told you have documentation regarding a suspected fraud case. We do, Lucas said, his voice steady. And you'll want to look at it immediately. The officer opened the back door and gestured for them to enter. Inside the cruiser, the overhead light flicked on, illuminating the documents as Lucas opened the briefcase. Richard sat beside him, posture straight, expression carved from stone. The officer's eyes widened as he sifted through the folders. These signatures are forged, the officer murmured. Your daughter never agreed to any of this? Not one letter, Richard replied firmly. She wanted nothing to do with that man. The officer turned to the next page, Damien's handwritten notes. His brows furrowed. This is coercion. An attempted identity misuse. An attempted financial fraud, Lucas added. He intended to tie her into his collapsing company as a guarantor. The officer blew out a breath. This is enough to request an immediate warrant. We'll alert our lieutenant. But before he grabbed his radio, another voice broke through the static of the night. He's already here. All three men turned. Damien Cross stepped from the shadows beside the hospital's loading dock, disheveled, furious, and no longer hiding the desperation spiraling through him. His coat was gone. His tie hung loose. His expression was something wild, something wounded, something dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with violence, only obsession. You think you've won? Damien spat, pointing directly at Lucas. You think you can take everything from me? Lucas stepped out of the cruiser slowly, calm but alert. You took everything from yourself. Damien laughed, a bitter, fractured sound. You don't understand what you're doing. She owes me. She owes you nothing, Richard snapped, stepping forward with more authority than the city skyline behind him. Not after what you've done. Not after manipulating her, threatening her, using her. Damien's face contorted. I loved her. No, Richard said. You controlled her. Those aren't the same. Damien's gaze darted between them, frantic now. You're ruining my life. She was supposed to help me get back on my feet. She had to sign those papers. I needed her, too. The officer stepped forward, voice firm. Mr. Cross, please remain where you are. You're under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, attempted identity theft, and coercion. Damien's breath stuttered. You can't arrest me. Not tonight. Not when my children are being born. Richard inhaled sharply. They're not your children. Damien froze. Completely. For the first time, he looked truly terrified. Lucas stepped in, voice low but sharp. Your name isn't on any genetic record. The test disproved your claim. You have no custody rights, no legal connection, nothing. Damien shook his head violently. You're lying. No, Richard said, final and steady. You are. The officer moved forward then, slow and controlled. Mr. Cross, turn around, hands behind your back. Damien's chest heaved, his eyes reddened. He stepped back as if searching for an escape, but there was nowhere left to run. Every path he'd carved for himself had led here to this cold Manhattan sidewalk, to these consequences, to this ending. He looked at them one last time, broken fury twisting through every line of his face. You'll regret this, he whispered. Lucas met his stare calmly. I doubt it. The officer cuffed him, reading him his rights. Damien didn't fight, he didn't speak. He simply sagged. Defeated. Finished. As the cruiser pulled away with Damien in the back seat, Richard exhaled a long, unsteady breath. Lucas closed the briefcase, locking it with a quiet snap. "It's over," Lucas said. Richard nodded slowly. For him, yes. They stood there in the cold night, two men who had fought for Evelyn in different ways, united by one mission. But for her, Richard added softly. Lucas looked back toward the glowing hospital windows. For her, it's finally beginning. By the time Richard and Lucas stepped back into the hospital, the adrenaline of the confrontation had faded into something quieter, an exhausted relief. Neither man spoke aloud. The automatic doors hissed shut behind them, sealing out the cold Manhattan air. Inside, the hospital lights glowed warm and steady, almost welcoming, as if the building itself understood that a turning point had finally been reached. They rode the elevator in silence, both lost in thought. For Richard, it was the weight of the report tucked inside his coat, a truth he still needed to explain, but carefully, gently, when his daughter was ready. For Lucas, it was the image of Evelyn holding her newborns, fragile yet fierce, steady even under pressure. Few could survive. He didn't know what the future held for her, or for himself, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to disappear from her life. When the elevator doors opened, a nurse greeted them with a soft smile. "Miss Hart is awake, tired, but doing well. The babies are in her arms." Richard felt a tightness in his chest that almost halted his steps. "May we see her?" "Of course," she said, "but please be gentle. She's been through a lot tonight." They walked toward the recovery room quietly. Lucas paused at the door, giving Richard a moment to gather himself before entering. Richard nodded gratefully, then turned the handle slowly. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by a small lamp beside Evelyn's bed. She looked up when they entered, her eyes, tired but peaceful, in a way that stirred something deep inside both men. The twins lay bundled against her chest, one tucked beneath each arm, their tiny breaths warm against her skin. "Dad," Evelyn whispered softly, "you're back." Richard approached slowly, reverently, as though stepping into sacred space. "I said I wouldn't leave," he murmured, "and I meant it." Evelyn's eyes glistened. "I'm glad you're here." Lucas stepped in next, standing beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," she admitted. "But lighter." She looked down at her babies again. "They're perfect." Lucas's voice softened. "They are." For a few minutes, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft breaths of newborns discovering their first hours of life. Richard's gaze softened, something old and unresolved thawing as he watched his daughter, a mother now, stronger than ever. "Evelyn," he said gently, "there's something I need to tell you, something important." Her expression shifted, but she didn't tense. "Is it about the babies?" Richard paused, choosing his words carefully. "Not in the way you might think. But yes, it concerns them. And you." Lucas took a quiet step back, giving them space. Richard sat beside her bed. "Earlier tonight, a report was given to me. At first I misunderstood it, but I want to tell you the truth clearly." His voice softened. "The baby's biological father is not Damien, but the donor is connected to our family distantly. Through the medical program years ago." Evelyn blinked, absorbing his words. "Related? How?" "A cousin," Richard explained gently. "Someone who passed long before you ever entered the clinic. The genetics aligned because our family shares markers." His voice trembled. "But you did nothing wrong. Nothing improper happened. Everything was ethical and anonymous." Evelyn let out a slow, shaky breath. Relief washed over her face, mixing with disbelief. "So the babies, they're connected to our family?" "Yes," Richard whispered, "in a way that's clean and safe and honest." For the first time in years, Evelyn reached for her father with her free hand. He took it, his grip trembling. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered. Richard's eyes softened. "Thank you for letting me back in." Lucas watched them quietly, a warmth spreading across his chest. Tonight had changed everything. Broken chains, shattered lies, rebuilt something fragile but real. Evelyn exhaled deeply, resting her head back against the pillow. "My babies are safe," she murmured. "Damien is gone, and for once, I feel like I'm not alone." Lucas stepped closer, his voice low but certain. "You never will be again." Outside the window, the first hint of dawn began to rise over Manhattan. A new light breaking after the longest night. Morning sunlight spilled across the hospital room in soft gold, brushing gently over Evelyn's face as she drifted in and out of sleep. The twins rested quietly in their clear bassinet beside her bed, tiny bundles rising and falling with every peaceful breath. For the first time in many months, the world didn't feel like it was collapsing around her. It felt suspended, calm, safe, held together by threads of hope she never expected to find tonight. Lucas stood near the window, speaking quietly with a hospital administrator on the phone. His tone was controlled and professional, but every few seconds he glanced at Evelyn, checking her breathing, making sure she wasn't struggling. Richard, meanwhile, reviewed a stack of legal documents delivered earlier that morning, protective orders, fraud filings, and the first official steps toward securing Evelyn's future. When Lucas ended the call, he stepped to her bedside. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. Evelyn blinked awake, adjusting her gaze to him. "Better," she whispered. "A little tired, a little overwhelmed, but better." Lucas smiled gently. That's all anyone could ask for after a night like this. Richard approached with a file in hand. "Sweetheart," he said cautiously, "there's progress on the legal front. The officers filed the preliminary charges early this morning. Damien's being held overnight." Evelyn didn't flinch, she simply exhaled, long and slow. "So it's really over?" "Legally," Richard said, "it's beginning. And emotionally, you'll close this chapter in your own time. But the hardest part is done." Evelyn looked from her father to Lucas, recognition filling her eyes. "I couldn't have done any of it alone." "You weren't meant to," Lucas said gently. A nurse entered the room with a stack of papers. "Miss Hart," she said kindly, "we need your signature on the protection order. It will prevent Mr. Cross from contacting you, approaching you, or attempting to involve himself with the babies." Evelyn hesitated only for a moment before taking the pen. Her signature was steady, firm, a small act, but symbolic of something much larger. "Good," the nurse said softly. "This ensures that he can't use legal pressure against you anymore." When she left, Richard sat beside his daughter and looked at her with a kind of awe. "I wish I had been here sooner," he admitted quietly. "To protect you, to help, but I'm here now, and I'll stay, no more disappearing." Evelyn reached for his hand. "Dad, last night proved something to me." Richard frowned gently. "What's that?" "That I don't have to do everything alone. I never did." Her father's expression softened in a way she hadn't seen since childhood. It carried remorse but also pride. Lucas stepped beside them. "There's something else," he said, clearing his throat. "The board of trustees at the hospital wants to meet with you, Evelyn, about your future. They received reports from patients and staff about your work, your dedication. They want to offer you a promotion track." Evelyn's eyes widened. "A promotion?" Lucas nodded. "A training program to become a senior nurse coordinator. It comes with better hours, higher pay, and full childcare support if you need it." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it almost hurt. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Richard said with a soft laugh. "Take what you've earned." Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They chose you because of who you are, because you're strong, compassionate, and irreplaceable, not because of what happened last night." Evelyn wiped her eyes. "I want to accept." Lucas smiled. "Good. I'll help you through every step." Just then, one of the twins stirred in the bassinet, a tiny cry rising into the quiet morning. Evelyn lifted the baby into her arms, rocking gently. Lucas instinctively moved to help adjust the blanket. Evelyn looked up at him, at the man who had stood beside her through every storm the night carried, and whispered, "I think, for the first time in months, I'm looking at the beginning of my life again." Lucas held her gaze, warm and steady. "Then let's build it." Outside the window, Manhattan glowed under the rising sun. But the brightest future of all was unfolding inside that room. Evelyn left the hospital 3 days later, the twins bundled in soft blankets, their tiny heads tucked beneath her chin as she stepped into the cool Manhattan morning. The city moved around her, cars rushing by, people weaving along the sidewalks, horns echoing in the distance, but for the first time in a long time, the world didn't feel threatening. It felt wide open, like something she was finally allowed to step into. Richard walked beside her, carrying the diaper bag with a careful pride that almost made her smile. Lucas followed with the car seat cradled effortlessly in his arms. They moved together as if they had done this 1,000 times before. A small unit formed from love, guilt, loyalty, and something new that neither Evelyn nor Lucas had dared to name. When they reached the hospital's main entrance, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, one of the hospital's transport vehicles arranged by Lucas. The driver opened the door, and Evelyn carefully handed the twins to Lucas while she climbed in. Lucas secured both car seats with practiced gentleness before sliding into the seat beside her. As the car pulled away, Evelyn watched the hospital fade in the rearview mirror. So much had happened inside those walls. Pain, fear, truth, birth, healing. It was a chapter that had nearly broken her, but it had also delivered her to a place she never expected. A future where she wasn't alone. Her father cleared his throat softly from the opposite seat. "There's something I want to say before we head home," Richard began, voice steady but weighted with emotion. "I can never undo the years I missed. But I want to spend whatever years I have left earning my place again." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes warm. "You already started, Dad. The night you came back, you saved me." Richard shook his head gently. "You saved yourself. I only supported the woman you chose to become." Lucas glanced at her then, offering a quiet smile that warmed her chest. When they arrived at Evelyn's apartment, a modest second-floor walk-up she had chosen for its affordability rather than comfort, Lucas hesitated. "Evelyn, there's something I'd like to suggest," he said carefully. "You don't have to decide today or tomorrow, but I want to offer it." She shifted the twins in her arms. "What is it?" He inhaled deeply, choosing each word with deliberate softness. "There's a furnished unit in my building, same floor as mine. Safe, secure. Concierge 24/7. If you wanted to move there temporarily, you'd have support. You'd have protection. And you'd never have to worry about Damien or anyone else finding their way to your door." Richard nodded in agreement. "It's a good offer, sweetheart, and you deserve somewhere peaceful." Evelyn looked down at her babies, their tiny fingers curled, their breathing slow and even, and considered the life she wanted for them. Safety. Stability. A future untangled from fear. "I'll move," she said softly. "Not because I can't handle life on my own, but because I want my children to grow up somewhere safe." Lucas's shoulders eased in visible relief. "I'll take care of everything. Movers, keys, whatever you need." She smiled, tired but genuine. "Thank you." As the days passed, Evelyn settled into the new apartment. Sunlight warmed the hardwood floors each morning, the quiet hum of the city creating a peaceful rhythm around her. Richard visited daily, doting on the babies with gentle awe. And Lucas, he became a steady presence, never imposing, always supportive. He brought groceries, helped assemble baby furniture, and sat with her through sleepless nights, talking softly while the twins slept in their bassinets. Their connection grew not from sudden passion, but from patience, trust, and a quiet tenderness that felt earned rather than rushed. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Evelyn spoke softly. "Lucas, thank you for being here through everything." He looked at her, not with expectation, but with sincerity. "I'm here because you deserve a life free from fear. And if you let me, I'd like to be part of that life." Evelyn's eyes glistened not with sorrow, but with the warmth of hope returning. A new beginning. The babies stirred inside. Evelyn turned toward the sound, smiling. "My future is right there," she said softly. "And I think you're part of it too." And under the glow of the city lights, with the past finally behind her and a new chapter ahead, Evelyn stepped forward into a life built from courage, truth, healing, and the love she never believed she deserved. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But if you are still here right now, in this final moment, then something in Evelyn's journey must have touched your heart in a way only real struggle and real healing can. Maybe it was her courage. Maybe it was the reminder that even after the darkest nights, the sun still rises. Or maybe it was the truth Marcus Aurelius once wrote: "What stands in the way becomes the way." We don't choose every hardship, but we can choose who we become because of them. Evelyn's story teaches us that healing isn't loud, it's steady. Strength isn't born from perfection, it's born from standing up one more time than we fall. And love, true love, finds us when we finally step away from fear. So if you're carrying your own pain tonight, remember, you are not powerless, you are not alone, and your future is still unwritten. And hey, if this story meant something to you, even just a little, please like this video, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and don't forget to subscribe. We're right here with you, every step of the way.